There he is. He joins us, the Hawthorn champion. His two clubs weren't great on the weekend. Luke Hodge is his name. Hodgey, good afternoon.
G'day, guys. Thank you for having me and everyone that's listening at home. No, they weren't, Kane. I think I'd have to agree. I did tip one of them at the start of the year. I did put Hawthorn as wooden spooners, and let's be honest, I got a fair bit of honest feedback there from the Hawthorn supporters out there. But I think the writing was on the wall. The way that they traded in the off-season, the way that they made the decision to go with young kids, this was always going to happen. They were good for a quarter and a bit, but then they just got outplayed and they had no senior players there to compose themselves. So, look, I think it's going to be a long year, but I think that's the way that Sam wanted to go. He wanted to teach these young guys his style and play from there. So it won't be the last time we'll be saying that.
It's the one game I haven't seen of the weekend, Hodgey. I was over at Marvel Stadium.
Don't go and watch it.
I'm interested in effort, though. Was the effort drop? Was it the effort that dropped off, or was it the system broke down because of inexperience, or Essendon just way too good? What's the Sam Mitchell feedback going to be to his group?
Yeah, I think their effort was there early on. Like they were leading at quarter time. They were I think a 3-point lead or something. But then, as it happens with young guys, things don't go your way, and sometimes you look for someone to settle things down and control the game. They just didn't have that experience that they've lost over the last 2 or 3 years. So I don't think you're taking it away from Essendon. Essendon looked really good. The way they moved the ball defensively, they were a lot better. And Hawthorn are a team that Mitch is reading the play of everyone else. He wants to move the ball fast and take risks, and sometimes when you do that you can turn the ball over and get scored against, and that's just a part of their development that they'll need to work on over the next few years.
And your other mob that you were the co-coach of for a period of time, or the co-captain, or whatever your leadership role was entailed.
I wouldn't watch that one either if I was you.
Okay, I did see that one.
That was very poor from the Brisbane Lions Football Club. I think from where they've come from, they're top 4 the last 4 years. The football they played against Geelong in the last practice match was really good. The intensity was up. This one just looked like a team who thought they were going to do it. They came up against a team who had a lot more intensity. Every time Port had the ball, they had a free person to pass it to. The Lions didn't want to man up, and it was embarrassing to watch the way they played with the list that they have. But then you look at the intensity of Port Adelaide, and I think Kane, as a former player, would be pretty happy with what he saw from. Yes, his man was pretty good as well. But all of them were. The intensity when the Lions had the ball, Port were right in their face. They were covering their exits. They gave him not an inch, especially in the second half. But that's where I think the Lions will look back at that and think, oh, this week's another big go against Melbourne, because their start to the season isn't easy. They've got Melbourne, Bulldogs and Collingwood. So they need to pick it up.
People have focused on the system of their defence. Heard a number of experts talk about a breakdown in system. Was it a breakdown in system, or was it a breakdown in effort which led to the system? Are you concerned about when they're up and running the system isn't right, or are you just worried about work rate?
The system's good when the attitude's good. When the attitude's poor, the system's poor. And what I saw on Saturday afternoon, and it's tough when you know a lot of these guys, it looked like the attitude wasn't there. They were going to walk out there and do what they wanted and walk away with a win with Port, who the pressure's on Port Adelaide because of Ken, and they've got a tough schedule as well. But it was their system. When they're up and about, their system's fine. So I put it down to their attitude.
Kane's got them winning the premiership after one game. Have you re-rated them?
I had them out of the 8, Port Adelaide, Hodgey.
Well, where's the loyalty there?
Oh, no. Well, you tipped Hawthorn to win the wooden spoon, so I guess we're even.
And I did tip Brisbane for the flag, so I might have to reassess my look. But I wouldn't. Brisbane are too good of a team to do this again. And we know that they had a good final against Melbourne last year, but unfortunately, the time previous to that they played Melbourne, they got embarrassed at home round 23 last year, where it was the exact same performance as what they put up against Port Adelaide. It was the exact same result.
But they did address that in the finals with a couple of really good wins. But Port Adelaide, what's your upside now for Port Adelaide?
Kane mentioned it before that they just want to take the game on. And you look at the young fellas that they have through there, the Rosies and then Horn Francis. These guys aren't scared to make a mistake. And I think that's how footy's turned. If you look at Collingwood, how they're being coached the last 18 months, it's to take risks. If you make a mistake, it doesn't matter, because that's the way we want to play. That's the way the game's going. Geelong have turned himself into that kind of team as well over the last 12 months. And that's what I see Port Adelaide. You see that. And I'm a big fan of Dixon. Playing him ruck, he's a forward ruck who's got that much impact, and he's not scared to use his physicality like a lot of bigs are these days.
Hodgie, stick around because we're going to do our 7 observation from round 1 for Kia, the award-winning 7-seat Kia Sorrento. Let's start with number 1, Sammy, Gerard and Luke. If you sign the richest deal in club history, Isaac Rankin, you can't be kicking 2 goals 5. And that some may say that's harsh, Sam.
That's harsh.
Some would say that's
Well,
harsh.
it's not.
I say it's harsh.
It's not harsh.
He's kicked 2 goals 5. He's had 7 shots at goal.
He should have buried that game by half-time.
Granted.
Adelaide dominated that game of football, and they coughed up a gold-clad opportunity to get a really significant win on the road. And that's the pressure that comes with it for Isaac Rankin. Okay, and maybe, maybe it's a bit harsh. You've got to give it a couple of weeks to see if this inaccuracy
I would have said it's the
is
best
a
game
trend.
I've seen him play.
It can't be the best game you've seen him play. Kick 2 goals, 5
I
and
understand
1 out
that,
in
but
the
he had
full.
7 shots. He had 8 shots, did he? He just looked so much more comfortable. He looked like a guy who could go in the midfield and dominate. So if I'm getting that, as Hodgie said, I'm going to back him in and just say, you keep going for it. You'll sort that
The
out.
pressure is there that if you put your hand up for the richest deal that the Adelaide Crows have ever signed,
I'm taking the 7 shots rather than 1 shot. No shot, no influence.
Kane, if he did the same thing when he was playing at Gold Coast, would you have the same thought process?
I think there's more pressure on him now when you put your hand up to leave and you take that contract and you're in a football state now, Hodgie, and you should have buried the game by half-time. I think there's a couple of extra layers that weren't there at the Gold Coast.
Very hot up there.
I understand
Very
that,
hot.
but
Very warm.
they paid for what he can do over the next 5 years as a young player, a young emerging player who's still developing. Pressure situations, a new team. You've got to put all these things into his thought process. So for him to have 7 shots, you're sitting there going, yeah, we wish he had kicked a little bit more, but I think it might be a little bit tough on him.
Okay, 3 on 1, but I'm sticking to my guns because your job is to kick goals, and it cost Adelaide the game. They tell us they're finals bound or should be this year. Well, if you're finals bound, you've got to be beating teams like Gold Coast when you have them on absolute toast.
GWS.
Sorry. Speaking of that game, we wrote Stephen Cornelio off too soon, and I'm included in this as well, by the way. I'm not abstaining from this discussion. So a new coach comes in, and it's not dissimilar to what Chris Scott did last year. He says, I'm going to focus on what my players can do, not what they can't do. Some of his numbers, so he's had 32, 810 metres gained, 14 score involvements, 8 clearances, 9 inside 50s, and a goal. I mean, where did that come from?
2018. This is a Stephen Cornelio 2018. Now, I know there were signs last year, Gerard and Hodgie, that some signs of life, but this was the line-breaking Cornelio, the tough Cornelio, the influential Cornelio, as you mentioned. So I'm not sure if we all wrote him off, but I thought we critiqued him according to the form that he exposed.
Their own club wrote him off.
And maybe now the man just should not have been captain. Maybe he just wasn't the right captain for the right time, and maybe that speaks a little bit to a new sense of freedom as well.
Hodgie, this one's...
I think it's...
Go.
So I think it says a little bit as well about the other guys at the top of that list. It's about the free-flowing, aggressive, just play football. You got Green, who had 37, Cornelio 32, Ward 31, 26 to Kelly. They're 4 of your best players through the midfield that are getting a lot of the ball. I think that says a lot about their game style as well and how they want to go about it.
Great win. Obviously, the Heat, they lost Perryman, they lost Whitfield. And Kelly. That was a big win for GW.
Observation number 3, Hodgie. Cam Rayner is wasted at halfback. So everyone looks for Dustin Martin, Jordan Agoe, Drake Stringer when he's going. Tom Papley moved in there and did an extraordinary. So everyone wants that powerful centre forward player, Shea Bolton. And Brisbane have got one, right? He kicked 4 on Marvel round 20 last year and exploded. And you go, okay, off the back of the knee injury, 4th or 5th year, 24 years of age, he can be that for us. So what does Chris Fagan do? He says, I'm going to put him in half back. He's wasted there.
I think what they were appealing about was his intercept marking, but I agree. I prefer to see him in the forward 50 because he can do that. He can take the game, he can change it from a mid-forward, but what they're trying to teach him about the game as well. That's also going to teach him the defensive side of things, but I'm have to agree with you. I
Jared's
prefer to see
wincing.
him in the forward 50.
Well, I haven't seen him do what you said, 4 goals in the second half or whatever it was, enough to be critical of Fags on this one. I like what I saw about him as a defender, and I'd just stick with him for another couple of months. They've got enough guys, ground ball players, up in that forward line. But I think their defence needs some work. So I can understand why he's experimenting.
All right, observation number 4. The advantage rule should be the simplest rule in the book to adjudicate, but we've made it the most difficult. I don't get the confusion here, okay? If a free kick is paid and your team elects to take the advantage, That's it. That is done. But I'm seeing the umpire call it back far too often. There was one yesterday, Gerard. You did the game with Fife. It's a free kick. Fife picks the ball up, runs into an open goal. He's taken the advantage. Why is the ball coming back?
I'm not sure. I mean, we are the only sport in the world that blows a whistle and then plays advantage. I mean, every other sport in the world, they flag, they have an arm waving, or they have two hands out the front. So the whistle doesn't interrupt anybody's psychology or behaviour. We don't stop because we don't blow. We blow the whistle and therefore we interrupt the play ourselves.
So the advantage rule is now on the umpires. It's not on the players. It should be the reverse of that. If you take it, you take it. It doesn't matter if someone's right there to tackle you. So that was confusing for me. Observation number 5, Fremantle are the New York Jets. What do I mean? Well, the New York Jets have got a great defence. They got no quarterback. Look at Fremantle's back 6. Pearce, Ryan, Cox, all 3 extraordinary key position players. They've got everything, those 3. Young, Chapman and Wilson.
Young should be the quarterback.
It's the best back 6 in the game. I don't know if there's a better, maybe Melbourne, but for depth, I can't find a better back 6 in the game. Yet they've got no quarterback. They cannot move the ball. Their forward line is a mess. So that's the observation. A lot of frustrations in New York about the Jets. They're looking to sign Aaron Rodgers as their new quarterback. Fremantle have got no quarterback. Observation number 6, Toby Green is 1 game into his captaincy, but he's already the second best captain in the AFL, Gerard.
He's got a good record. I can't dispute that, Kane.
They laid 2 tackles in the first quarter. The Giants, 2 tackles in Adam Kingsley's first game. And there's a moment in the second quarter where Toby Green says, stuff this. I've had enough. It is what Luke Hodge would have done. He just inserted himself. He just came up to the stoppage. He nailed Rory Sloane in a really aggressive tackle. Then he won a contested ground ball and handballed it out to his opponent, and he inserted himself on the game. Now, he had 8 shots at goal. Better than Isaac Rankin. He kicked 4-4, but I just think he's a terrific leader, Hodgie.
There's no doubting that. I think when he had the opportunity last year to captain the side, and you could see him grow with that responsibility. So I think it was pretty clear when the new coach walked in, they had a bloke like that who can turn a game, who can have impact, and he's not afraid to be physical. And that example you just said then is put his body on the line and I guess show his other teammates around him how to go about it. So
I was looking at your face when he said 4-4, Hodgie. I reckon you thought he was going to cook him.
I was waiting for a little bit of a spray about not being efficient in front of goal, but I couldn't agree more with the attitude and what he's done in the leadership manner. We all know that he's had a few issues on and off field over his career, but what he can do on the footy field with his leadership is very good.
Observation number 7, Eric Hipwood's 7-year deal is going straight into the Jared Polak contract hall of shame. 7 years for Hipwood, who could manage 4 touches, Hodgie. 7 years Brisbane Lions gave him.
Yeah, well, he's
on what evidence?
Up and coming centre half forward, who Queensland boy, they love him up here. He's good for the group.
4 years wouldn't have been enough.
Oh, if I was a player, I'd take 7 over 4.
I'm not critical of the player. I'm critical of Hipwood and his management. Congratulations, hats off. You've pulled the wool over their eyes. I'm critical of the club.
Without knowing either, he may have taken a lot less and said, I want longevity to stay up in this football club, so I might take 300,000 less to have a longer contract than going somewhere else and getting a lot more money. So you don't know the ins and outs and the details of the contract, but as far as long contracts, it is a long one.
Often those contracts are designed, no, I'm speaking broadly here, to help the club.
I don't think he's getting underpaid though, Sam.
No, but you can spread the money out over 7 as opposed to taking less and putting that cap, which would be stressed, you'd imagine, particularly after the off-season they've had from the trade perspective and where they're at in their contention status, to take the pressure off the cap. It would be.
So
it would
what
be
you're
club.
saying you're saying it was a selfless move by him.
Very selfless.
Both Brisbane and Hipwood.
He should be applauded.
Yeah. All right, and I've just got observation 7A. If I can.
You've got another one.
If I can.
Okay.
If Luke Jackson isn't careful, he's going to be inducted into the Jared Polak contract hall of shame.
One game in
as well. No, 0 marks.
One game in.
Now I read. Now you can say that he's taken less all you like. I've read, and I'm believing the magnificent journalists such as yourself, Sam, that it is 7 years for the average of $900,000 per season, and he didn't take a mark yesterday under a roof. Against an opposition that had all their best key position players out.
No, it was a disappointing performance. I can't argue. Who can argue against that?
What's his best position, Hodgie? Because I look at him and I think to myself, there's no lob. Why don't they play him in the goal square and interchange him with their number 1 ruckman, who is also capable of going forward and playing out of the square?
I thought that's what the plan was. It was to start forward and be a big key vocal to go long. And as you said, Kane, get it to the top of the goal square because you've got a 6'7" bloke standing there. And then when Darcy needs a rest, rotate him through the middle. It's almost like similar to the Gawn role that he had. He'll be starting as a forward, then moving into the midfield. But kind of have to agree, 12 touches, full game of footy and no marks from a person of that size is a disappointing result.
Well, it's pretty tough to mark a ball down in their forward line because there was 35 players down there.
Yeah,
the bloke kicking it was the only bloke not down there most of the time.
He did have a couple of opportunities, and he's got the old Nick Larkey cement hands where the ball just bangs off. Now, Larkey was terrific on the weekend,
He did kick
granted,
6.
but he did against a very poor opposition. But if they're not 1 and 2 for the most drop marks in the competition, and I'm chasing down our mates at Champion Data to find me that stat, Nick Larkey and Luke
Well, you'll have your opportunity tomorrow when Horney makes his debut.
Let's discuss that tomorrow.
If you do look at the marks that they've taken, all the marks was in the back half with their uncontested mark. Look, very rarely, because they moved the ball so slow, you had Cox had 20 marks, Ryan had 13, Young had 13, Clark had 11. They're moving the ball that slow that by the time it does get into the forward 50 with him, they got every St Kilda person down there next to them trying to spoil it.
So if you put yourself in Justin Longmuir's shoes, Hodgie, what are you going to do this week? And what are you going to aim to do? Do you think he's accepted that things have to change?
I don't think you accept it. I think you look at they played a St Kilda team coached by Ross Lyon, and you can see straight away the old Ross was his defensive structure and his mindset was back there because they were a lot better than what they've been in the past, St Kilda, in their defensive manner. But what I'd be looking at as Fremantle is look at the teams that were appealing this weekend, the Collingwood style, Geelong early in the game, the teams that wanted to take the game on, go through the corridor, and if you've got big forwards down there like a Jackson, utilise him and get the ball to him as fast as you possibly can with taking the least amount of risks to turn the ball over. But that's how you get your Larkey kicking 6 goals and the other forwards kicking a big bag by moving the ball quickly. So they're 1v1 and not 1v5 as he found a few times against St Kilda.
The lid's off at the Magpies, Hodgie. Just from an observation point of view, they look to have all the pieces to be a real premiership threat. Do you agree, and do you see any weaknesses in their makeup?
What I like about Collingwood is the courage to... 27-minute mark of the third quarter, they're down by 22 points. And I'm sitting there thinking, how are they going to get into this? How are they going to score? Yes, Geelong were very efficient going forward, but Geelong were covering the middle where Collingwood wanted to go. But all of a sudden, because they kept pushing at Geelong fatigued, their defensive structure wasn't as good late, and Collingwood kept going through the middle. They found Pendlebury through the middle a few times, who opened it up to the big side of the ground where they had a lot of space to go into their forward line. And if they made a mistake, as we were sort of saying before, they weren't told to not do it again. It's you continue to back yourself. You've got Dacos on the half-back line who will pull the trigger. I couldn't believe some of the kicks that he was doing last year as a first-year player, and he's continued in that area and getting better and better. My only doubt on it was, and this has come from a person who played under Clarko, so it's a defensive-minded thought process. There were so many times where they would hedge their bets and just run forward, and Geelong would have a 1v3 in their forward 50. If there was a turnover, Geelong have got a goal. So that's where there was a lot of times that it was a Russian roulette style of football. But the way Collingwood are playing, they're happy to take those risks because they know they're going to get scoring opportunities. Is
there anything you can do out of the centre bounce now, do you think, because of the new rules? And most teams used to start someone off the back of the square. Phil Walsh used to do it way back with Eddie Betts, used to sprint off the back, gives you protection, but it's also an offensive mechanism. I reckon Collingwood do it already with Nick Dacos. So he almost disregards his opponent as a defender and comes in, sets in off the back of the square for the handball receive, but also to protect the likes of Melbourne who storm out of the centre bounce. Is that a viable option, or do you see that as too risky?
No, you can do that, but you need to be on the same page as your other defenders. If you're starting in front of your man and you're going to squeeze in, then you need your teammate behind you to be in front of his opponent. So then if it does get kicked over your head, that he's there to cover you and spoil or intercept the mark. We saw Baker, which almost cost Richmond the game against Carlton, where Baker's gone off the back of the square. That's the one where the ball got skied and Akers dropped that ball. He was by himself because Baker took the risk and ran in hard to try and impact that stoppage. So there are some positives, but there also, if you don't get it right and the blokes behind you aren't ready to cover you, it can hurt you as well.
So much focus on Collingwood, as there should be, and the magnificent games of both Dacoses. I couldn't believe the accuracy of Josh Dacos' kick too. His 2 left foot kicks in the first quarter, unbelievable. But Esava, the old Esav, Radicalea, at full-back stroke key defender for Geelong, he was one of the highlights of the round. And as much as Geelong would be filthy on losing the points, they have unearthed a bloke who, Ken Hinkley, actually, we saw tears coming down his face and his cheeks in here a few weeks ago, missing out on him, and he's just the sort of player they could do with. But, gee, he looks a hell of a player, Hodgey, in defence.
It is. That's where a lot of the good teams are starting their ball movement from. They're getting people down back. If you look at Collingwood have that many intercept markers because that's where they can get the ball and off they go. It's an attacking move from them. And that's what Geelong have been able to do. They've already got the Koning down there who's an intercept player. This is just another added person who is strong, he's quick, and he can man up on a key forward of the opposition, as he did on McStay, and had a fair impact.
Sammy, speaking of Ken Hinkley trying to sort out a key defender, Ben McKay's future has been spoken about at length this week.
Yep.
Unrestricted free agent.
Yes.
Port Adelaide with some interest. They won't be the only club.
Absolutely not. No, widespread interest in this sort of a player, of course, and you can understand why. So hasn't put pen to paper yet. Free agency eligibility, of course, they'll come far and wide. It is North Melbourne's version of Tom De Koning in a different way. He'll be talked about until he either re-signs at North Melbourne, and you can't blame him. There'll be a suck-it-and-see approach for Ben, I'm sure. And his value is only going to increase when he gets back into that side and the season goes on. So he'll be a real point of interest.
Carlton will be
sure.
absolutely in the mix.
Assuming Carlton can keep Geelong at bay when it comes to Tom De Koning. Yeah,
but if one
sure.
goes, well, maybe that opens up the checkbook for the other.
Hey, Hodgie, the absence of Joel Selwood at Geelong. I made some observations on TV yesterday just about the jovial nature of the players running out and the relaxed approach of Patrick Dangerfield and that filtering through the group. That's always been there with Geelong, but Joel's been the one to have that hard edge, and you just know not to muck around when the game starts when he's there. He's now not there. How big an absence will that edge be for Geelong this year?
I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I did see your comments about that, and I think the game has changed a lot. I know that when we first started, if you were smiling before a game, that means you weren't serious, you weren't ready to play. And if a senior person looks at you laughing, they'll give you a clip over the ears. I think that's changing. They want players to be as relaxed as they possibly can. And even if you watch in games, someone will make a mistake and they start laughing. If we did that early on, you would get a clip over the ears. But it is a big call. Joel, I've never seen a more relaxed football club than the Geelong Football Club in how they do stuff. As far as meetings, if you're late to a meeting, the meeting will continue. And they won't get told off unless it becomes a habit. Where I've had a few former teammates go down there and that they just sort of say it's so relaxed. And no wonder why blokes can play for so long is because of the mindset that you're in when you go to the football club, and it's not everyone's riding you to be on time and that every session you go to. But the only thing is, as you said, is Joel is that person who, as soon as he says, right, it's time to be serious, you know not to stuff around because he is that competitive beast. There is a gap there for some of the other guys, like a Tommy Stewart. I know Danger's a bit more laconic, but there's a few other leaders in that group that may have to step up just to let the younger guys know when it is time to be serious, because they've earned that freedom and that relaxed environment because of the success that they've had over the years.
Certainly didn't hurt them early when Ireland were 2 goals to Collingwood none.
That's right. There was a couple of just efforts that you think very un-Geelong-like that wouldn't have happened in the grand final. What do you look at the tackle count? But 44, they averaged 58, and some defensive stuff from stoppage that was poor. I don't expect it to be a significant issue, but I think it's a question worth asking.